So before we get started on this one, I want to make sure that you have everything up to date. Now, I just released a video where I show you how to get all of your dependencies up to the latest versions, because some of the techniques we're going to be doing in this video require you to have the latest versions of this stuff. Not to mention, you want to sort of be on the latest anyways if it's a long-term release candidate. So now we have version 15 of React, React DOM version 15, and all this good stuff with our Webpack and Babel loaders. So if you want to find out exactly how we updated everything, check out the video. There's a link to it in the description, and there's a annotation on the screen right now that you can click. Watch that video first before continuing on with this series if your React dependencies do not look like this. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit interesting. What we're going to be doing is essentially adding people to our list here. If we come to our site, you could see we had that searching going. It working great, right? But we want to be able to add people. Now, this is sort of different because what we don't have is we don't have a database we're working with. So this is going to be a little less about how you actually add things and a little bit more about a form and on submit and stuff like that. So in this video, we're going to head to our contacts list.js. And the first thing I want to do is set our entire list of people, our entire contacts, which we had as this.props.contacts. We want to have that in a state variable. Like I said, this isn't necessarily how you might be doing things in the future if you're working with a database. I know Meteor and React is a really popular stack, and obviously you wouldn't need to be putting your data into a state variable, but for right now, let's just go ahead and not worry too much about that, and we can just say simply contacts is going to be equal to, and now we need to bring in props. I don't know if we've done this yet, but we need to bring in our props into our constructor, so we can say props, and then we also need to bring in our props into the super. Now, instead of being able to say this.props, we can just simply say props. If you try to use props when setting state inside of your constructor, and if you don't pass in props into constructor and super, it will not work. So go ahead and do that. Now we just need props.contacts. Okay, we can verify this totally worked by using this.state.contacts when we have our filtered contacts. So we can say this.state.contacts because that's going to look at this, which is set to our props. And that should totally work now, because this is essentially the only place we were actually looking at that contacts list. Let's go ahead and do our application, give this a refresh, and you can see our names are still coming in and the filtering is still working. Cool, so let's go ahead, and now what we want to do is add a form. We had this input here before, and that's all fine. Let's go ahead and add a placeholder to this, placeholder, and that can just be equal to search. Just so we have a differentiator between these two text boxes, considering we don't have really any style going on here at all. Now below this one, I'm going to go ahead and add a form. Okay, nothing crazy here. And inside of this form, we need a couple of boxes. We need two text boxes, one of which is going to be for the name, and the other one is going to be for the phone number. We can say input type is equal to text, and this is going to have a ref of name. Now I'm going to show you how we can use refs to grab the value directly from this input without actually having to set it into state. Now, it was useful for this search box input to be in state, right? Because every single time we were updating it, we were using that value. And this time, we're essentially going to be grabbing the values whenever we submit this form, so it's not as useful for these to be controlled inputs. Now we can have this be phone, okay? Now, of course, you could have a placeholder and everything like that, but this isn't an exercise in building a sort of user-friendly website here. This is just sort of a React concept stuff. So what we want to do is we have our input type text and our input type text that's a phone. We have both of our inputs. Now let's go ahead and actually respond to the event. Before we had an on change on the input, But let's go ahead and have an on submit, which is an event that we have for forms. Now this can take a function, which we can have as this dot, and we can add contact, okay? And we'll also need to dot bind this because we're going to be wanting to use this. Okay, super cool. So now we need to add this add contact function, because what this is going to do is essentially we're going to grab both of these values, then we're just going to put them into the state. So we can come up here and we can have an add contact function, and we need the event passed in. We need this event so that we can say event.prevent default. Now you might be wondering, hey, why do I need prevent default? If you didn't have this prevent default when you submitted this form, your whole page is going to refresh, and that's not good news. So now to get an idea of what we're going to be doing with these refs here, we set these two refs, this input type ref, cool. And what we want to be doing is we want to use this as a console.log and just say this. Now at this point we want to go ahead and just throw a type submit button in here, so we can just say button type equals submit. That way we can actually just get this submitting. We could say submit, or let's just say add new contact. Okay, and this button will make it so we can actually hit enter on this button if we want, or just press the enter key itself. As you can see, we have a new contact form. So if we come here, oh man, this default button styling is great. Okay, so we can say Scott and have a number, and you'll notice when I hit enter now, we get this object. Now this object refers to this, and you might be wondering what this is. Well, we passed into our form on the onSubmit, we bound this, which is this component essentially. And within this component, there's things that you might expect, such as this dot state, which we have access to, right? So if we head here, you should see this dot state right here. Again, we have this dot props, which is right here. Now the cool thing is we have this dot refs, and we have this .refs.name and this .refs.phone. If you open up this, we have access to everything we would want for the input, including if we scroll down far enough, the value, if I ever get to V. Okay, so V, value, Scott. Super cool. Okay, so not only do we have access to this value, we have access to the input itself, and we can modify this. So in our add contact, we can say this dot refs dot name dot value, and now this should output the value. Let's go ahead and confirm that. Let me bump up my font size on this console just a little bit. Let's head over to this one, and we can say Courtney, enter, and as you can see, it's outputting Courtney. So why is that important? It's important because we can now use that to access both the name and the phone based on these refs. And we can push those into our array of objects in state. Now we can do that by saying this.set state, and we want to set the state of contacts, and we want to equal to, and we can now have access to the current this.state.contact. So let's grab all of the current contacts, which is an array of objects, and we're going to push, and inside of this we're going to push an object that includes both the name and the phone. Now, if we remember in app.js, we had these properties as name, phone, and ID. Let's talk about an ES 2015 way of doing this. We can do this by setting some variables here. We can just say let name equal, and we can grab this .refs.name.value. And likewise, we can set this phone to this .refs.phone.value. Now for the ID, we don't really need a incremental value. In fact, the ID is really just going to represent some sort of unique number associated with this. So let's just say we want to go ahead and say let ID equal to, and we can say math.floor, and inside of here we're going to have a math.random. So we're grabbing a random number, we're going to multiply it by 100, and then we're going to just add 1 to it so we can get numbers between 1 and 100. Okay, so this is some just real basic JavaScript here where we're grabbing some random number, multiplying it by 100, adding it to 1, and then flooring it. So we're getting rid of any decimal points. So we're rounding down. Now we can push inside of here in this object. Now we can say ID, comma, name, comma, phone. Now this is a new way of doing things in ES 2015. If you haven't seen this yet, you can essentially grab a variable and have it just set in an object like this. And this is the equivalent of doing something like ID is equal to the ID variable right here. So it's just a shorthand for setting objects. So let's try this out. We can add in a name here. We could say Lucy and give her a number. And you notice we're going to get an error that contacts.filter is not a function. And you might be wondering what's up with this. Well, we used .push to push an object into an array. Well, there's a few things wrong with this. One, you should never modify state. So this .state.context.push is modifying state without using this .set state. So you should never modify this directly using any sort of changing like this, like push. And what push is doing is it's directly modifying the original array. Now we could use another JavaScript method called concat. So concat, which is not actually modifying this. It's actually creating a new array with these items, and it will return a new array where push is going to return the number. So what was happening is contacts was getting set to a number value like 5 because it's adding the 5th item. And of course a number value doesn't have the method filter down here. So that's where that error was coming in. But you should never modify this. So this .contacts.concat will essentially create a new array and set it to contacts. Let's go ahead and come in here and let's refresh. Let's try this one more time. We can say Lucy and say 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 0. Enter. There she is. And in addition, because we added her to the filtering, we can now filter for her as well. Now, one big issue is when we add somebody, the inputs here are still keeping their value. And now the easiest way to do that is to simply just set these to 0 after you submit. So after you submit, the refs.name.value is going to be equal to an empty string. In addition, the same thing for the phone. Like I said, this is more about working with this form here and grabbing these data from these refs than this set state stuff that we're doing here, because obviously if you're working with data like you're in Meteor, you're going to be pushing stuff to your database rather than just modifying or pushing an array. For instance, right here we're adding this list and we're adding Lucy, but every single time we refresh she's gone. So let's go ahead and add her again, Lucy. Okay, and we can hit enter. And now you'll notice she shows up and our inputs have reset to 0. Super cool. So we're now adding people to our contacts list app. Obviously, this isn't hitting an API. It's not saving this information anywhere. But what we are doing is we're getting information from a form into a function here, and we're able to clear our form and manipulate this data and even do some JavaScript stuff in here. Cool. So as always, this is Scott with Level Up Tutorials. Now, if you are interested in React, there's a really great cool, awesome thing called React Native that allows you to build real native applications with React. So if this React stuff is feeling really cool and something you're just liking it, check out React Native. There's a React Native series from Level Up Tutorials called Next Level React Native for iOS and Android. It shows you how to build really basic but definitely useful techniques in React Native for iOS and Android both. So as always, this is Scott with Level Up Tutorials. Head over to store.leveluptutorials.com and help support Level Up Tutorials and free tutorial creations. By the time this video is released, I'll have uploaded 900 videos free on YouTube. So if you want that number to keep going up and up and up and up, help support by heading over to store.leveluptutorials.com. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.